Hello, my name is Graham Moss. I'm the Principal Building Surveyor for the Australian Building Codes Board. This video is an update on NCC 2022 changes found in BCA Volume 1. This video is not able to cover all the changes, and especially not in detail. This is why I recommend to you the list of amendments. You'll find the list of amendments in the back of each edition of the NCC, in the back of each volume. We do this every year. We provide a list of what's changed. So when the publication version of NCC 2022 is released, I do recommend that you have a look at the list of amendments. NCC 2022 contains a number of changes that have come from the Quantification of Performance Requirements project. For some time now we've been working on this project, which is about quantifying the performance requirements, that is, taking the subjectivity out of the performance requirements and replacing that subjectivity with numbers, quantified targets, so that compliance can clearly be shown and met. You may have noticed our public comment draft that we released for NCC 2022. And in that public comment draft, we proposed to change quite a number of performance requirements on account of this particular project. We received a lot of comment on those proposals, and taking that comment into consideration, the board chose not to go ahead with these specific performance requirements, the proposed new Part A8 and also the proposed structural performance requirement amendments, including that to do with glass at risk of human impact. However, these other performance requirements are in 2022, quantified performance requirements are in BCA 2022. I'll show you those in a moment. But first, Part A8, you may recall this as a new part that was to quantify all the 5 related performance requirements into one part found in the new governing requirements. It included tables of acceptable risk for fire spread and exposing occupants to untenable conditions, of course, so that probabilistic risk analysis could be shown that compliance with all those performance requirements was met. That part did not go ahead for NCC 2022. However, the board of the ABCB is committed to quantification, and therefore please watch this space for future editions of the code. Structural quantification also didn't go ahead. This was proposed to have some probabilistic risk analysis applied to structural performance solutions, quite similar to Part A8. It didn't go ahead, but something similar might be investigated for NCC 2025, so do watch this space. The proposed glazing performance requirements for glass installations at risk of human impact, both volumes 1 and 2, also did not go ahead for NCC 2022. Now, these are what did not go ahead for NCC 2022, but let me show you what did make it in for 2022. First is sound insulation quantification. This is what FP 5.2 looks like today in Volume 1, and Volume 2 has a similar performance requirement also for attached residential Class 1s. And the level of performance sought currently in NCC 2019 is this: that which is sufficient to prevent illness or loss of amenity. Now, this is a subjective measure of performance. There's no numbers to say what is sufficient. And of course, what might be a loss of amenity for me might be different for you. So the quantification project came along and taken the subjectivity out and replaced it with a weighted standardised level difference with a spectrum adaptation term, if relevant. Now, you probably recognise that these numbers come straight from the existing verification method. Next, the bushfire performance requirements have also been quantified for NCC 2022. This also is in both Volumes 1 and 2. I've got Volume 2 displayed here today. Now, NCC 2019 simply says that a building must be designed and constructed to reduce the risk of ignition from a bushfire. What sort of bushfire? Well, that's where we've quantified it for NCC 2022. We've specified a designed bushfire. That's a new defined term, but as you can see from the definition there, we're talking about the characteristics of a bushfire, ember creation, things like that. The characteristics of a bushfire that has an annual probability of exceedance, an annual exceedance probability not more than 1 in 50. Of course, an annual exceedance probability is the likelihood of any event occurring in any given year. So having established a designed bushfire, it's possible to specify exactly the characteristics of those bushfire, and therefore the performance requirement has been quantified. Now, I need to point out something important with the quantification of bushfire performance requirements, and that is that there is a range of annual exceedance probabilities for different types of buildings. So H7P5 that I showed on the previous slide showed a 1 in 50 year probability for a Class 1A building. And now it's a relatively low severity bushfire because it's more likely for a 1 in 50 annual exceedance probability bushfire to occur in any given year. Now, it's been the case in Volume 1 for some time that you have to protect Class 2 and 3 buildings from bushfire. Now, you can see that in the quantified performance requirements, these buildings, Class 2 and 3, have been given a 1 in 100 year design bushfire. Now, of course, that's more severe than a 1 in 50 year bushfire because it's less likely for that event to occur in any given year. For NCC 2022, we've introduced bushfire requirements for certain Class 9 buildings with vulnerable occupants. Note that the annual exceedance probability for these special Class 9 buildings is 1 in 200 years. So, of course, that's a very high relative severity. Note that the Class 10C private bushfire shelter also receives an AEP of 1 in 200. That's bushfire quantification. This next quantification occurred just in Volume 2, and that's spread of fire. This is the performance requirement in Volume 2 that's behind Part 3.7. It's why the deemed to satisfy provisions require that a wall of a house within 900 of a side boundary will have to be brick or have a 60-minute fire rating. On the screen now is the 2019 performance requirement, P231, and it says that a Class 1 building needs to be protected from the spread of fire. What sort of fire? Well, that's now quantified. It's a 92.6 kilowatt per square metre flux fire applied over 1 hour and also applied within 900 of the boundary or 1.8 metres of another building. Now, you've probably noticed that these figures come straight from the verification methods that are in this section. Note, however, that also a probability of 0.01 is included also. So in other words, in order to show compliance with this performance requirement, you need to demonstrate a 99.99% chance that your Class 1 will withstand that 92.6 kilowatt per square metre flux for a period of 1 hour. The last quantified performance requirement for NCC 2022 for the building code is automatic warning for occupants. Now, this one's only in Volume 2, and it's the performance requirement that means that houses have to have smoke alarms. This is what it looks like in 2019. For 2022, we've added a few more details, but you can see that the quantification that is added is efficacy and reliability. These are new defined terms. I'm not going to put these up, but just describe here that the effect is very similar to that previous performance requirement about spread of fire. That is, that there has to be a very high probability that the system installed for alerting occupants of a fire is going to do its job.